What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. I am the co host of the show, Kyle Anslone, and I'm joined by the co host, Will Porter. Will, how's it going today?
Good, Kyle. How you doing, man? How's everyone out there?
I'm doing well. I think we got a full show today. Of course, we had the Breonna Taylor grand jury results in that set off quite a storm, so we'll be weighing in on that. The Pentagon stealing a whole bunch of our money, and some updates on what's happening to Julian Assange in Yemen. So I think we got a real great show today. Make sure people are taking the time to share it. All the feedback me and Will have gotten on the show so far has been really positive. The download numbers look fantastic, and we're really excited. But share the show if you can. Facebook, Twitter, wherever. You use social media. We're on both Facebook and Twitter. The Facebook page is just Conflicts of Interest, and Twitter is at con_interest. Then subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you do that as you're listening to this show, you will likely have a chance to be the 100th subscribers. I think we have like 98 as of recording this. So things are looking good. And let's get into the show here, Will.
Right.
As I mentioned, the first thing we have up today is the grand jury indicts one of the three officers in the Breonna Taylor shooting, but nobody indicted for her death. The story here, written up by the Louisville Carrier Journal, says that 5 months after the shooting that killed her, and people demanding to arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor, nobody ends up getting arrested for that. They did indict one of the three officers, Brett, or I guess a former officer, Brett Hankinson, who I guess was fired for, or actually fired for prior to this, and then indicted for first degree wanton endangerment because a bunch of the bullets he fired just tore through the neighbor's apartment. So, cop gets scared, shoots his gun off like a lunatic, and actually gets somebody held responsible. But as far as it goes for, Miss Taylor, no justice for her death. So, Will, I guess we should maybe get into some of the details here. And break this down a little bit, because I am seeing a lot of like the pro Blue Lives Matter people saying that, well, she wasn't in bed, the cops knocked on the door, the boyfriend fired first, and so of course you're not going to indict anyone.
Yeah, right. I mean, with this verdict, it was interesting. We kind of had some preview, like we had some hint that it was going to come. The city was kind of they had sort of hinted at this, that there was going to be some verdict that people were not going to be too happy about, because I think they even declared a national emergency and stuff ahead of the announcement. But Wednesday, yeah, we finally got this announcement where, indeed, as you said, we did not get any charges related to her actual death, Breonna Taylor's actual death, just this wanton endangerment thing. And on the face of that, it kind of does sound outrageous. It's like they're saying, like, wow, like firing your gun like that was really dangerous. You could have gotten somebody killed, even, like theoretically as a hypothesis, when they actually did shoot somebody, or they did kill somebody shooting like that, so wantonly and, indiscriminately, basically. However, this jury found that Taylor's death was justified because her boyfriend opened fire at the officers first. And that is something we had known previously, that her boyfriend had shot at the officers. But like the more controversial part of all this, of this grand jury verdict, I don't know, there was a more controversial aspect. For a long time, we had understood that these cops were not in uniform; they were in plain clothes, and that they were serving a no-knock search warrant, where they can just basically bust down someone's door into their house. But now, with this verdict, the Kentucky Attorney General is saying that actually this was not a no-knock raid. And he's claiming that one of the witnesses there that heard the cops identify themselves and they knocked or whatever before they tried to break in, which happens to contradict like 10 other witnesses that had said, they did not announce themselves, as well as Breonna Taylor's family and her lawyers and stuff. They all maintain that, no, there was no announcement. But because of that testimony and that witness, apparently the grand jury decided that the cops were justified in shooting into Taylor's apartment, and they have no liability for her death, because, again, the cops apparently announced themselves. But they are saying that the one officer does have liability for endangering the other people by firing into their apartments, or near their apartments, sort of like, blindly or indiscriminately. So it does seem like this is all the punishment we're going to see for these three cops. It was just the one, too. The other two completely got off. They were all fired, but this Brett Hankinson guy is going to be the only one to face any charges, I think. And I don't think wanton endangerment is all that as severe of a charge. Certainly nothing like he would have seen it for like a homicide-related kind of indictment.
So I guess one thing, from my understanding, there's still an ongoing FBI investigation. And, one of the things we have here on the video feed is who killed Breonna Taylor, because the Kentucky police came up with, we can't tell. They said she was shot 6 times, but only one of those shots was fatal. So that's pretty crazy, too. I mean, this lady essentially ends up bullet ridden. But they said it was the officer Cosgrove that actually, fired the lethal shot. That according to the FBI analysis. And so, with the FBI actually doing that analysis, I thought maybe that the FBI would have something to say at the end of this. So I guess I'm not completely pessimistic that this is, the end of potential consequences for these officers, our former officers. Um, so,
If I could, do you mind if I cut in real quick right
yeah,
there?
go ahead.
I could be wrong. You could maybe correct me on this if I am mistaken. I thought the FBI was looking into specifically like a civil rights case, that whether there's any civil rights violations. And it seemed to me that if they're finding that her actual killing was justified, that like it seems that there would not be civil rights implications of that. But I might be mistaken. Maybe I misconstrued what the FBI is actually looking into there.
Oh, I mean, I could be wrong, but from my understanding was the FBI was still, I guess, looking at charges, and that it was not necessarily dependent on what this investigation came up with. And so maybe
Okay.
they wouldn't be as serious or something like that. I guess just to get to one or two more details of the actual shooting itself before we maybe talk a little bit about no knock grades or stuff like that, um, is where Breonna died and was killed and how all that worked. And so initially they, the narrative was she was shot sleeping in bed, which seems actually not to be true, that she at least was awake and potentially had gotten dressed before she was shot, and that she was shot and killed in the hallway and not in bed. So does that seem right, Will, that she wasn't killed in bed?
Yeah, as far as I understand, that is not the case. That she was not shot in bed. That is something that people had been saying for a long time. There's a couple like similar claims like this that floated around a lot that ended up not being true. But yeah, as far as I understand, she was shot in the hallway. I'm not totally sure what hallway they're referring to. Whether they mean like the hallway within her actual dwelling. That's what I understand, inside her actual apartment building or apartment like dwelling, rather than the hallway of like the building itself. Like outside of her actual home.
Right. So then I was also just trying to get in my head here. The no knock grade was something that was the official narrative. Now the police say they have one witness who says they did hear the police announce, and I guess the police themselves are saying that they decided to announce themselves. But we have other witnesses who have said that the police didn't announce themselves. And I guess it seems like, at least in the grand jury hearing, so what the people of the grand jury actually got to hear was that the police announced themselves, and that this was probably, I'm guessing, weighed significantly in, them making their decisions, although, I don't know that for sure. So how do you have any a sense on, like, what the actual truth is? Because from my understanding, the police weren't wearing body cams either, and so all we really have is essentially the statements of these various witnesses.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the balance of the witnesses, as far as I understand, there were far more witnesses saying that there was no announcement and no knock before they tried to bust down the door. I think there was just one witness who claims that yeah, they heard them announce themselves in some way. But the thing is about these types of raids they do, a lot of the time the cops will have they have to announce themselves, but they do it as they're smashing the door down. Basically, they say like police as they're hitting your smashing your door in, so that like I don't know. That doesn't really give much of a chance to like think about that or react. If you think that people are intruders, private criminals are breaking into your house, then like that might not do much to deter you shooting at them if you hear police or hear them shout something as the door comes down. So it's not totally clear to me. Like you said, there's no body cam footage, there's no body cams. So we don't have anything to really settle this question. But I do sort of get the impression, just based on things that I know about other raids and based on what some of these other witnesses said, that like no, they did not really announce themselves like to a sufficient degree where her boyfriend inside would know, okay, this really is the police, and not just like private criminals trying to come rob me or do a home invasion or something.
Right. So I guess I'm pretty sure we talked about this either on foreign policy focus or conflicts of interest in the past, Will. And we had obviously come to the conclusion that the police murdered Breonna Taylor, and I was just I still stick with murder, and at least the officer who put this together, and then Cosgrove who actually fired the fatal shot should be charged with murder. Maybe there's a third officer who didn't fire his gun as recklessly towards Breonna Taylor, and somehow they could prove that, and willing to hear that case. But at least two of these three officers seem like they need to be charged with murder for me, Will. And that didn't change for me at all. Hearing these new details and what the grand jury said, and I'm just curious. With it seems, at least looking on Facebook, some people are changing their mind. A lot more the thin blue line matter people are making the argument that the cops were justified here. I was wondering if your mind had changed on it at all.
No, not really. Again, like we're saying, we're only talking about one witness here that is saying that's contradicting the other 10 or so. I forget the exact number of witnesses that say there was not an announcement. But to me, that's like, I don't know, just hearing what one person says it, so all the other ones are completely negated. Like I'm pretty skeptical of that. And yeah, like I tend to think that these officers should have faced more, at least the ones who are directly responsible for the, actually shooting her. Or at least even shooting into her apartment or something. They probably should have faced more consequences than what we see here.
Yep. So then, just looking at another thing for me was, I think a lot of people are focusing on whether the police knocked or not. I think another thing that really should come into question here is the time that the police went to this apartment, and if there was a need to go that late during the day. It
Right.
just, thinking of the situation that the guy was armed. They had at least claimed that Breonna Taylor's former boyfriend was involved in the drug world, and that's why they were looking for her. So she was somebody who maybe was concerned about somebody coming to her house in the middle of the night and trying to harm her. And my guess is that if somebody's trying to murder somebody, they're not above saying that they're the police at the door. So it's, one of the reasons why police officers should really focus more on apprehending people in easier ways. Like if you really feel like you need, to arrest Miss Taylor and search her apartment, just wait till she leaves. Once she walks out the door, come put her in handcuffs and then walk inside. But that's obviously not the path they chose here, and it doesn't make sense why you would do this in the middle of the night unless you just see yourself as like some special forces guy in Afghanistan kicking down the Taliban door and getting him while he's in his jammies or something like that.
Right.
And this is the U.S. Will, we're not supposed to have our cops behaving like this, and it's pretty absurd. And unless cops start being held responsible, I don't think much will change. It's nice that I think the city of Lexington and the state of Kentucky have made some reforms as far as higher up officers had to apparently sign off on search warrants, and they're going to try not to do the no knock warrants or raids during night if they don't have to. But at the same time, the cops will find different exceptions to make to be able to carry out the raids they want to carry out. You know what I mean? They'll find a way to paint whoever in court they want to as being the Pablo Escobar Kentucky, and them having to come in the middle of the night to make sure they don't flush all the coke down the toilet. And so I guess I don't see it getting better until they start holding cops more accountable, even with some of these reforms. And taking up something like Rand Paul's Breonna Taylor Act, I still think could be helpful too. Getting rid of no knock raids as a country completely is something far different than just trying to regulate it so it's a little bit harder for some average street cop to do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Something definitely more strict and radical than what they're, this kind of like beating around the bush, this like, tinkering around the edges kind of reforms they're doing. People respond to incentives. You need to make there be something to incentivize the officers to not do things like this. And if there's no consequences, there's no repercussions, then they're gonna they never will have a reason to stop. It doesn't, that it won't change.
Right. So if we could just start holding cops accountable for shooting people, and different U.S. officials responsible for war crimes, maybe we can make some difference here. Will.
Yeah, like the law and everything. The law.
So the next one I have here